wanted to know if it's important, relevant, and if we should look at it. But if you decided to skip it, I'm fine with that. Thank you.
Yeah, well, let me show it to you since you brought it up and since I had that point there. I skipped it only because I think it's a little confusing because, but it's a good point. It makes a good point for a different reason. So just give me a second here. I'll show you what I mean. Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. And the reason I think it's a little bit confusing is CloudFront isn't necessarily used for all of our services, so it's unlikely going to be exam content here. But basically, what they're getting at is that with the client, you can go out to Route 53. So the client puts in a web address, it goes out to Route 53 to get the IP address, right? And then ultimately, we care about the IP address by the time we get to our instance, which is over here in the VPC. And depending on what the service is, we can leverage CloudFront, right, which is that distributed edge network, and feed that through the Elastic Load Balancer we saw earlier, and then ultimately get to the EC2 instance. So this is a good example and a good discussion of, a next step after all of the stuff we talk about today is tying all these things together, right? And that becomes a solutions architect role, right, which I'm assuming many of you are ultimately going to take on. Because then it's going to be, all right, I need to tie these various pieces together, and that's the way we can go about that. So that's kind of why they had that last point there. So I would emphasize from an exam perspective and for our points of discussion that, yeah, ultimately these things need to work in concert with each other. And for certain scenarios, that's a good example. We're gonna get our IP address from Route 53. If we're using CloudFront, we're going to go to the edge location, which is